Hello everyone and welcome to Anne Salve Women. For today's video, we're going to talk about my article on the obstruction to victory, fear, disappointment. And just like many other articles that I write, they are all very dear to me because I really feel that whether it be one person out there that's listening can be truly inspired or just comforted in the words that I speak. And you know, as real as I try to make it, hopefully you can dig deeper into my words and really coming from that part of knowing that all of us go through times where we run into some disappointments in life, and yet what we don't realize is that sometimes we activate our fear already before we even get there. And when we arrive there, it's almost as if we've positioned ourselves, we've directed ourselves into that path, and then everything that we feared is truly what ends up happening. And then we look back and think, why did I do that? And at this point in my life, I realized that I had to come, getting over it was the biggest obstacle, honestly, and just really embracing the fact that, you're going to have disappointments. You're going to really, truly run into times where you are just going to find yourself feeling as if it's not going in your way or in the direction that you like. And that's what the video I'm going to be talking in this video. This is what I'm going to be talking about today, is really having that obstruction be seen as something that can be moved. But before I do that, I want to show you my very painting that I just did, and it's back there. I'm really happy of how it came out. I can't wait to hang it up downstairs. Just giving you just a update on what I've been working on, and then hopefully I'll move on here quickly to yet another one that's already in my mind. And out of my husband's request, that'll be fairly simple because he's into abstract art. But let's get back to this one. And this fear, disappointment is a mental block. I know this, and I could speak of this because I know that when everyone around you, again, not to their fault, and maybe it is, if honestly, if you stay, I'm going to say this, if you stay in that position where you're always thinking that the world is accountable for all of your mishaps, for everything that's happening to you, and you get to a point where no longer are you accountable, but you have that victim role where you're thinking to yourself that, I am who I am, or I am where I'm at because I've been placed here. And yet you have to ask yourself, who put yourself there, I mean, there are definitely circumstances where I feel that people have fallen into misfortune and they are in the predicament they're in because of someone who put them in that position that they had no foreknowledge of. And I think about young children that are placed into positions. I think about certain circumstance where you're placed into positions where you really didn't plan for it, and then yet you find yourself in that situation. And you always pray that people continue to stay in their goodness and have faith and be pulled from that. But in this article, really focusing in on that locus of control, just understanding that if it's a mental block, it's something you can work out. And I know that being around people who only knew of disappointments or ran into their own disappointments, all of a sudden that's the only thing that they can teach you, and that is the only thing they can speak of, and they're really good at it, and to a point where you really feel like you gotta be careful, because when you're in a dark moment, you're also in a vulnerable moment where then people can start to really feed you some things that are so convincing, and yet you don't realize that's not the only option. And you don't have to live in that mindset. You don't have to go in that direction, that there is other ways of thinking. There are other ways of doing. There are other ways of living. And so the belief of the mind is something that we all have to be careful of as to what we allow to enter. And, inside, I've always been competitive. And it's interesting because I came into this marriage and seemingly it seemed like perhaps when I had children, I started to fall back a little bit. Instead of like being an alpha mentality, I was more of like the omega, and sometimes questionably a beta personality, because I wanted my children so much to be in that competitiveness, and I wanted my husband also to continue on to be really in his alpha mode at all times. That you know, as a parent, as a mother, you have to pull back sometimes, and yet as a child, I was that competitive person. It's just really hurtful, though, when you feel that you're so constricted, you're so limited, and you look around and you think to yourself how you don't want to put anyone at fault. I love my papa and my mama. You know, coming in as immigrants, I could see that they were trying. I could see that raising children was not easy. I was just that personality as a young child, that I always felt like I was that old soul. I always wanted to be around the elderly. I wanted to hear and learn from them. I didn't really honestly want to be around other children all the time. Still that way to a certain degree, even as an adult, because I always felt like I needed that wisdom to fill me, and I wanted to hear that wisdom around me. And yet what was being spoken and then what was being taught, I couldn't help it inside question. And I'm actually really glad now that I did question silently some, you know, things, because I didn't want to always believe what I was seeing. I didn't want to see that there were people just giving up. I didn't want to see people that were just easily getting discouraged. And so when you are surrounded on the outside of disappointments, it's hard to continuously be competitive on the inside. And I'm actually very grateful that I don't think I ever let go of that competitiveness, because when I look now at all the many things I've accomplished, it was never for anyone else. Honestly, I always felt like I was competing against me. And there was always that other voice inside me that would say, you know, you're never going to get this done, you're never going to finish. And it was always that inside, the other side in me that would say, no, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you that this is going to get done, that not only is it going to get done, but it will be done well. And so wanting to be on that winning team is a good thing, right? You want everyone around you to be a winner. You want everyone around you to persevere, to be competitive, to push through all obstacles. But what I'm starting to learn now, being a teacher, being a parent, just being a mother, walking around and seeing other mothers and with their children, some people like it easy, and they think that easy is, you know, a safe bet, that we're not going to really run into that many troubles. The more you want, the more you have to sacrifice. And for me, it was something that I always felt like a good curse to want more of yourself. And I married a man in that same manner, and I really truly believe that that's why our own children really ended up doing so well. It's because also in their, what was inherently in them coming from us, is that you have to forgo reaching to the highest limit and just really believing in yourself that you can. And so for me, it's a hard obstacle to jump away from all these disappointments growing up as a child. You want to be in a winning team, and yet you see so many people that have been taken down. And maybe even before you were born, they were already getting badgered. They were already getting battered. And then all of a sudden, by the time that me being number 5 in my family, I came around, you know, you start to accept. It's almost like you were trying you didn't want to, but yet all of a sudden, for the sake of peace, you started to accept where you were. And it wasn't until middle school, and I was bused up north and going into a new school, and I started to see, you know, that there is just different life. I secretly would take the bus to downtown Seattle and get to see life myself. And, you know, that there are people who dress a certain way, not the way I dress. I was tacky. I was so tacky because I had so many hand-me-downs, and I sewed my clothes. My beloved brother who passed away actually taught me how to use a sewing machine, and I got to watch my grandmother going to senior homes, you know, using sewing machine, creating pillowcases. So at that point, I had enough basic fundamentals to take my hand-me-downs apart, so that by the time I got into middle school, I would actually sew them into something new to me. And yes, they were probably still tacky, but they were new to me. And by the time I was in high school, my mom was able to get me a position at a grocery store, and so I could buy my own clothes. I could get into a competition and pay my own way. In fact, to a point where a lot of my classmates thought I had money. I still remember Derek saying, "Your parents are rich, huh?" I was thinking to myself, oh boy, if only he knew that there were times where I was wrapped around in a blanket and I could see the vapors, you know, inside. It was colder inside my house than outside. You know, moments like that that you don't share with anyone because those are deep, and yet you overcame them. And so for me, it wasn't this powerlessness as a child until my surroundings changed. By the time I was in high school, I started putting myself in activities because I was placed, luckily, into classes where then I was exposed to different mindsets. And when you are exposed to different mindsets, where you start to really understand that there is more than one way to think, and, you know, the other ways of thinking are more powerful, and that they were empowered by their own thoughts, you couldn't help but do the same. And I remember going into this one building and I was to lead this meeting. And, you know, I don't know if I recall this in my writing this in my article, but going into this building and going into, you know, this meeting room where there's this marble table from the one side to the other end of this long room, and glass windows in this tall skyscraper, and I'm creating this meeting in front of everyone with all my fellow classmates. And to me it was like, wow, that's pretty amazing, you know, that not for me but really the room itself. And I was like, people meet here, you know. And you have to understand, I'm coming from my papa being a businessman in the Philippines, but you didn't see those kind of things. And then, you know, coming here, and he had to take like jobs where he was just doing maintenance stuff. It's good for the heart and the soul, you know, really see that and see that this can be, you know, that life that you always felt like, that winning team. And so being surrounded with that, coming from as an immigrant, and then I mentioned in my article, going through the spelling bee for the very first time of knowing what it's like to win, I'm so glad that seed was planted in me, because then I knew possibilities were endless. And I honestly, you know, like started to believe that it's like I can overcome anything and really continue on and just keep dreaming, and then be a doer in my dreams and pursue it. And not everything will always be the way I turn out to be or hope to be, and yet you would get there, you know, sometimes, not all the time. And then yet it was that pursuit of always winning that felt good. And when you got there, you were like, oh, what more could I ask for myself? And I know that our children were trained that way too, because I remember my children, our oldest, you know, when they would win, it would be like, okay, what next can you do? And you learn that. You really learn to have that hunger to keep going and going and going, because there's so much more of you that not just for yourself could you do, but for those others watching. And so I remember that Mike Tyson fight, and I think I did write this in my article. And I remember being disappointed that he was apologizing to everyone, because during that time that I was in high school, I mean, he was in the highlight of his life, you know, and just really doing amazing things, even such a young age. And then all of a sudden, as a parent, then he was starting to come down to, you know, his last years. And I remember the last fight he had, and he's apologetic for having lost and feeling like he let the fans down. And this hurt me, because that is where I came from. I came from people always feeling like they let people down. And I know that feeling. This is a strong word. I dislike very much that feeling of feeling like you're letting everyone down around you because you quote unquote lost or did not win that battle. And I did not want Mike Tyson to apologize. And even in my favorite movie, The Man with the Iron Mask, I remember Aramis saying that, you know, to I think it was Philippe, the twin brother, and letting him know they were going to take over, because the other twin brother was this really cruel, heartless brother, and they were going to secretly switch, but they had to train the good-hearted twin to be just cold-hearted as well. And that, to me, is when Aramis says you should never apologize, as you are the king. And I got that. I got that. You know, listen, you have to really have the mindset of knowing that you're going to err. You're going to just not always make everyone happy. I mean, I've lived long enough to know you're not. You're just not. I mean, as a mother, not always going to make all of your children happy. As a wife, I know I'm not always going to make my husband happy. As a teacher, goodness knows, especially, you know, in the years and the school I'm in right now, it's tough to always get that happiness instilled in people if they're already walking around convinced that they cannot be. And you know, with your own children as well, they have their moments. And so it's tough because you want to be apologetic for the world, and yet there's no control over what other people are going through. And the only thing you have control is within yourself. And I had to learn that. And so those who have been there from start to finish, for me, are who I'm grateful for. And there are some people you don't see all the time. I have a neighbor now that I probably go to lunch with maybe once every, because that's just me, you know, I really want to put my time in when I do go to lunch with people, but I think it's like maybe every year, and we live right across the street, and yet, you know, you're thankful that they are able to give you that positivity. And the very rare people in your life, anyone who only knows how to teach darkness, anyone who only knows how to teach disappointment or lead you into thinking that way, into being loathsome, being skeptical, and, you know, just doubting the world, that's where they're coming from. They're coming from a non-winning corner, and that's all they know. They sometimes are very, you know, much an expert on that. And you know, it's great to hear that when you kind of want to just sulk in your own miseries, but it's not going to get you anywhere. It's not going to get you up and going and to pursue, you know, the destiny that you were created for. And so I've thankfully been surrounded with people who haven't given me that excuse to fall back, just to keep moving forward. No matter if I fall on my face, I'm going to be moving forward. And so, you know, just remember that sometimes your light is someone else's darkness, because they can't understand your determination, your perseverance. They only know how to doubt. They only know how to cast doubt on your own thoughts. They only know how to make you feel like you won't get there, because they're creating maybe spite and bitterness in you. And again, I look back at Mike Tyson and his moments where he clearly, he didn't have to say, you know, when you have seen people who can be starting to see, you know, that there can be people who can be very dark and feed you darkness. You could see that, and you could see that the darkness, his light, as much as he was illuminating, the darkness was coming in. And it's unfortunate, because you only need maybe one or two or three, and I truly believe that, who are pure of, you know, illuminating light versus so much darkness, because light will never be beat by darkness. And I'm grateful to know this and be aware of this and to really be empowered by this. And so I'm now understanding that when you surround yourself, you really have to have that as your control of who to surround yourself with. Because even though they act like they are there for you, they may just be watching you long enough to see you in their same fall, in their same predicament, in their same discouragements and disappointments, and their same surrenders. I now realize that you have to continue to be around people who will refuse failure, will refuse surrender, and know that even if they may never get there, they could end up leaving this world trying. And that to me is victorious, never having that victim mentality. And I'm really thankful for having been surrounded with that and having then been instilled in that mentality, because then I can pass it on. And I hope to, you know, until my time is over, I really hope to be strengthened even more and then strengthen others as well. So I'm going to end this with the quote that I have outside my classroom door. In the presence or absence of an audience, the greatest applause comes from within. You have to understand this. You have to believe this. You are sometimes your only cheerleader, your only pat on the back, your only embrace, and your only love, because others are doing them. They're doing what they have to do to keep going, and it is not to their fault. But you also have to understand that you are in control of that audience. So keep that in mind. I think that's it for today. Okay, so I'll see you next time. In the words of my mother, God bless us all. Thank you again for your time, and we will see you when we see you.